Right now, it is time to bring in Arthur Schwartz. It's time for Arthur Schwartz, the food maven. Arthur joins us on a Monday morning, right around 7:33 every Monday morning, and we hit various topics of food and events. And ladies and gentlemen, here he is from the kitchen in New York, Arthur Schwartz. Good morning.
That was such a Borscht Belt introduction.
I know.
It's in your genes.
It's in my blood. That's right. I can't help it.
I know you can't. But it's a good quality, so I wouldn't worry about it. So this is the time of year when I don't want to cook. At least I don't want to turn on any heat. As it is, we can't go out to eat in a nice air-conditioned restaurant, and I'm certainly not going to eat on the street in this weather. So, it's either have something delivered, and we're very limited. Even though, I live in a place where you can get almost anything delivered, it's still of limited appeal. Anyway, so cold food. I did do some cold food this week already, and we hadn't even started the actual heat wave coming today. I heard on TV that it counts as a heat wave if you have 3 days in a row with 90 degrees or more.
Yep.
And 89 counts. I love that. If it only gets to 89 one of these days, it still counts. So, one of my favorite things, cold, is something that is very vaguely, generically called tarator, Tarator, tarator. And I guess that's a Turkish word. I first learned about tarator, I don't know, actually a zillion years ago, but let's say I first became enamored of tarator as it is served at my favorite Turkish restaurant, not only here in Brooklyn, but in all of New York, called Taci, Taci. That's a C that in Turkish is pronounced J. So it's Taci's Beyti. And a Beyti is let's say a trattoria. Taci, I knew Taci. Nice man and a great cook. Unfortunately, had a terrible smoking habit that ended in lung cancer, which he survived and lived for quite a few years after, and then died of I don't know what causes, but he was not all that old. His sons, well, let's say his as he would have put it, the eldest son of his first wife inherited the restaurant, which is on, by the way, on Coney Island Avenue and Avenue P, as in Peter. Anyway, so tarator there, and I learned many years later the actual recipe, because Taci then trusted me after 20 years of going to his restaurant. And by the way, he eventually opened a second restaurant with the eldest son of his second wife, and that I believe is still open or will be when we can open restaurants again, and that's in Forest Hills on Metropolitan Avenue. So back to tarator, as it is served at Taci's, it's labne or strained yogurt, Greek yogurt, essentially, mixed with sour cream. That was his secret ingredient. About 2/3 yogurt and 1/3 sour cream. The one I made this week, which actually came out quite wonderfully, had less sour cream only because I was trying to use up a container of sour cream, and it wasn't quite enough to make as much as I wanted. So maybe I had 25% sour cream instead of 30%. Anyway, to that, I added a large clove of garlic, which just because I never do this, and I thought, well, I see people do it, and I hear people like doing this, I grated the garlic on my microplane. I must say, it does incorporate into the yogurt in a smooth way, so that normally I would just very finely chop it. There would be actual pieces, but tiny, tiny, tiny. In any case, I like the effect. One clove of garlic, one nice-sized clove of garlic for what it amounted to altogether a little over a cup of yogurt and sour cream mixed. And also a big pinch of salt, and also dill. I may have had like 2 heaping tablespoons, let's say a quarter of a cup even, of finely chopped dill fronds. It's so good. And it lasted it didn't last several days, but we couldn't eat it all the first meal, so it was in the fridge for 2 more days, and then we ate it, and it was still wonderful. Actually, the dill permeates as it sits. You get more dilly. So if you're going to keep it for a while, you might want to pull back a little bit on the dill, and you could always add a little bit extra at the end, even as a garnish. So that was one of my that is one of my go-to cold dishes, and you can eat it with pita. You can eat it on toast. We finished off the last bits of it just on crackers as a dip. It's very handy to know. Oh, I missed the main ingredient. Well, tarator is always yogurt with nuts. So the main, really, I can't believe it. The main ingredient here is 2 nice heaping-ish tablespoons of tahini. So it's a little bit of sour cream, a lot of Greek yogurt or labneh, tahini, garlic, salt, and dill. That's it. No oil. So it's actually it's not low fat because I use full fat, actually 5% Faye, because that's what Harned likes. He often eats that with fruit or as a light meal, which it is compared to other meals. So that was the other thing is I used to have I once wrote a column called 2 cans are better than one. I looked for this. I must have written this 30 years ago. So you open up a can of something. It sounds terrible, but you open up 2 cans, mix them together. Sometimes it's magic. I learned this from my best friend's aunt. So we're talking 60 years ago. I was a teenager. And she used to mix together a can of tuna and a can of Progresso brand caponata, or otherwise known as eggplant appetizer. I don't think that product is on the shelf anymore. There are other brands of caponata that I can live with, especially if they're mixed with a can of tuna, and it may only be because I have such nostalgia for this. When Aunt Nancy wanted to gussy this up, she would add some finely minced red onion, or if she had it, or maybe that's it. That's all she would add. She would add some finely minced red onion. Years later, I started adding finely minced red pepper. But that's beyond 2 cans are better than one. Right now, 2 cans are better than one is my a frequent. A can of chickpeas, well drained. You don't have to rinse them. But in this case, I don't often even drain them for other uses. But for this, yes, you want to drain them. Put them in a bowl with a can of tuna, flaked. Now, I use light tuna. If you insist on using white albacore with water, packed in water, be my guest, not my thing. However, I do like olive oil, so even if you're using water-packed white tuna, I do want you to address this salad, really what it is, with some really good extra virgin olive oil. And what I did the other day was, because I needed to use up some celery. Celery does not last as long as you think it does, I always say. I go to use the celery, and, this is the last legs of this head of celery. So, and I always have to have celery in the house. I use it so much. So I had to use up a few sticks of celery. So I finally minced that, and I had some scallions, some actually beautiful fresh scallions, including the greens that were very fresh. So I 3 biggie scallions went in there, also finely minced. What I do is I cut them lengthwise, and then if I have the patience and they're the right size, I'll maybe cut them in quarters lengthwise, but usually half is enough for a scallion. And that's it. Lemon juice, oil and lemon juice. We could eat that every third day. And if not with chickpeas, the same thing with a can of well-drained white beans, cannellini. Truthfully, I don't like canned cannellini as much as I like canned chickpeas, because chickpeas are firm and nice, whereas canned cannellini, especially for this purpose, are too mushy for me. It's fine if you're going to make a bean puree, or soup with a can of beans, but for a salad, I want the beans to be, I don't want them al dente for sure, but I want them firm enough that they don't turn to mush. So that's a second thing. And I am really big at this now, starting July 4th, tomato salad. So I could do a lot with tomato salad. And in fact, I have a nice bowl of very sweet cherry tomatoes sitting here, and we're probably going to eat those today. And probably I haven't really figured it out yet. I do have some herbs in the fridge. I have some basil. I have some more dill. I have parsley. I might just chop up a lot of herbs, dress the tomatoes with the herbs, oil, and use it to toss with pasta. I don't mind cold pasta. And by the way, Italians don't mind it either, even though they will tell you differently. They will tell you they never make pasta salad, which is totally not true. In fact, there's a thing. Of course, Italians have to make an excuse for doing whatever they're doing they don't think is quite right. Like, for instance, when you eat raw vegetables, you're eating pinzimonio, meaning you're pincering. And when you eat lamb chops that have bone and fat on them, and you got to pick them up with your hands to get to it, they call them scotadito, meaning dita, meaning burn your fingers. So they name it. So in this case, a bunch of raw vegetables tossed with pasta, which is inevitably going to be cold, is called crudaiola. Everything raw. And truthfully, you could toss a lot of different things into this. I mean, the base for me is these cherry tomatoes, which I will quarter. At the very least, they're pretty big, so I'm going to probably quarter them at least. Maybe cut them into sixths even, meaning cut them in half, and then cut them each half into 3 pieces. I don't know. As I go, I'll figure that out. Put them in a bowl, and a good thing to add to crudaiola is carrot and celery, something almost everybody who cooks has in their refrigerator. And you can either dice very finely the carrot and celery, or at least the celery diced very finely. The carrots I like to play with a little bit on my mandolin, so to speak. And so I might cut them into julienne or ribbons, or not ribbons, but really fine threads, let's say, fine threads, just because I have fun on the mandolin, and also because it's a nice textural difference. And then you can add some seasoning ingredients like capers. I always have salted capers in the house. In this case, I would wash off the salt and drain them. Soak them for 15, 20 minutes so they're not so salty, and in cold water in a little bowl, and drain them well and toss them in. You could add nuts if you like, chopped any kind of nut. Truthfully, walnuts, almonds. Pecan's not a very Italian nut, and I wouldn't waste my pignoli on these. Although if you ever go to Costco and have bought their, a kilo of pine nuts, and you wonder what to do with it, this is a good place to put them. That's happened to me where I had too many pine nuts and I had to find places to put them before they, I could put them in the freezer actually.
Pine nuts by themselves stink, but when you put them in salads, they're great.
Well, I like pine nuts, but I'm very particular about pine nuts lately because most of them are coming from China, but actually are coming from Korea by way of China, and I know people who've had bad reactions to them. Let's just say that. So, how do you tell? It's hard to tell. The stubby, triangular ones are the ones to be wary of. The elongated ones are, the European ones are immensely expensive. That doesn't mean that some Chinese ones are being sold as European ones, but the European ones are elongated. When I say European, mostly from Spain and Italy. But those triangular ones can be problematic at best. So, nuts. In fact, let me say, there's a pasta recipe in Southern Italian cooking. Let's see if I can find it. I hadn't thought about this pasta in a long time. And it's funny, it's called garbage pail pasta. And it comes from a restaurant, actually. It's a very famous recipe. I didn't discover this. The restaurant itself is very famous, too. So the reason it's called garbage pail pasta is it has so many ingredients that it's like, everything but the kitchen sink kind of thing. I was saying how Italians name these things like that. And this one actually does have a lot of nuts, as well as those cherry tomatoes. So while we're at it, so the restaurant is called, I can't even say it in dialect, but it's a dialect name, Ikurti, which means the little people, because the founders of this restaurant were twin midgets. The descendants of the midgets now run the restaurant. It closed and then it reopened. It's right outside of Naples in a little really dumpy town called Sant'Anastasia. But the recipe has become famous. This is a famous place, by the way. One main reason is they make a liqueur, and it comes in a very fancy gift box, and I don't know. It's sort of got a cachet in Italy, the liqueur. So, people who know about the restaurant, I went to the restaurant, of course, more than once. So the recipe is interesting. It has 3 different kinds of nuts in it. So I get a letter from a woman saying, I love this recipe. I made it for my family, except I left out the nuts because we're allergic. I'm looking at this recipe. How do you leave out the nuts? But you know what? You could leave out the nuts. So I'm much more I'm much looser these days about these things. And in fact, I'm sure the way this became a thing was that they were just trying to use up stuff. So here it is. This is 3 tablespoons of extra. It's a cold sauce. There's no cooking here. 3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, a tablespoon of finely chopped walnuts. That is, by the way, a local nut there. 1 tablespoon of finely chopped hazelnuts, which are also a local nut. 1 rounded tablespoon of whole pine nuts, also a local nut. 2 tablespoons of raisins, preferably golden raisins. A rounded tablespoon of salted capers, as I mentioned before, rinsed. I like to soak them a few minutes, and coarsely chopped if they're very large. Sometimes you're lucky to get little ones and not have to chop them, but I don't care. Either way it goes. And then your cherry tomatoes. Now, my recipe, as it appears in the Southern Italian table, which, by the way, is available as an ebook. I published it myself with a new cover. Go take a look. I love the cover. It's from Tia Delia, Aunt Delia's kitchen. In any case, I have only a quarter of a cup of finely diced cherry tomatoes, but these days I would use more. I would use at least a half a cup, if not even more than that. And then a big pinch, or a half a teaspoon, let's say, of dried oregano, and a tablespoon of chopped parsley, and I have 6 Gaeta olives, which I always have in the house, but if you don't have Gaeta, Kalamata olives are a good substitute. 6 olives, pitted and coarsely chopped. And that's it. That is garbage pail pasta because it's got everything but the kitchen sink. It's metaphors in two different languages. Actually, in Italian, this is called oh, by the way, at Curti, the preferred pasta is spaghettoni, which is thick spaghetti. A really other good pasta would be bucatini. They call it spaghettoni al setaccio dell'immondizia, meaning garbage pail pasta. But, some Italians would argue with that translation. I don't want to argue.
Listening to you, I've realized that without even knowing it, I've done what you've done. Over the past week or so, I've chopped up tomatoes and onions and green peppers, put some red wine vinegar on them, and then some toast points, or else I take some corn tortillas.
Toast points. I have to laugh. Toast.
I know. So it's been small pieces, and I put that mixture on top with a little bit of mozzarella. Or else I'll put that mixture on top with a couple slices of avocado, and I'll also put it in a corn tortilla, and I'll have that for dinner, a light dinner, and it really is good, and you don't have to.
Yeah,
cook.
I would think. Cook it for me, so I don't even have to toss. Cold noodles are great, but you do have to turn the heat on at some point in the day to get the noodles cooked and then be cold. So I suggest, now is a good time before it gets too hot. Cook up your noodles. By the way, I am more, even though I love that dish, and I do a lot of variations on chopped up cherry tomatoes, a can of tuna, I do crave Asian flavors that I am being deprived of because unless you want to order in, which I do. Sometimes, but not so often. I've been making for myself cold noodles with sesame peanut sauce. Now, I don't keep Chinese sesame paste in the house, so I use peanut butter, which I always have on hand because I often eat peanut butter even for breakfast. And you make up a dressing of peanut butter, soy sauce. Let's say a cup of peanut butter. But no, not a cup of peanut butter.
Yeah,
let's say a half a cup of peanut butter. At least 3 tablespoons of regular soy sauce, and several tablespoons of sesame oil. Now, that is something I keep. So let's say for a half a cup of peanut butter, a quarter of a cup of soy sauce, 3 tablespoons of sesame oil, a couple tablespoons of rice vinegar or just plain old white vinegar, and a few cloves of garlic, finely minced if you like. You could put ginger in there as well. And then if you like it hot, either a big pinch of cayenne pepper or some hot chili oil or even Tabasco sauce, whatever you like to heat things up with. And that's your dressing. On top of cold noodles with a garnish, well, really more than a garnish, but to make it into a salad, I even shred cabbage, like slaw, carrots, which as I mentioned before, I have fun making into threads on my mandolin. And at the very least, I usually have those in the house. But you can always add some minced scallion or onion, shallot, whatever, even or not. The garlic may carry the whole thing. And that's really good. Just, either linguine or spaghetti. It doesn't have to be Chinese noodles. And, the famous, I'm not going to do this now because it'll take too long, and I only have a couple minutes left, but you can look this up in my book. Actually, I think it's in more than one book, but I know it's in my New York City food book. The famous recipe for cold sesame, Sichuan-style cold sesame noodles that was popularized in the late 60s at Huahuan Sichuan Inn in Chinatown. That was the beginnings of Sichuan food in New York City, and it was only because there was an influx of Chinese chefs. I'm not going to go into the whole history, but you can read about it in New York City Food. I must say, I'm extremely proud of my chapter on Chinese food in New York.
Oh.
And it opens with, I don't know if you watched this movie ever or recently. I every once in a while have to watch it again. Is My Cousin Vinny.
Oh, yeah.
With Marissa. That's the movie Marissa Tomei got her Academy Award for. By the way, Marissa Tomei is in the new movie which is streaming. I forget where, probably Netflix. What's his name from Pete from Saturday Night Live? Pete Davidson. This is it's really a depressing movie, but I had to see it because Pete Davidson is a depressing person, and it's mainly about it's a barely fictionalized version of his life, in which Marissa Tomei plays his mother, and it's not a small part. She carries the movie, I have to say, and some of the critics said that, so I had to watch it. Anyway.
What's the name of it?
My Cousin Vinny opens with Marissa Tomei in her totally authentic Brooklyn accent. She grew up here in Midwood, section of Brooklyn. The Chinese food here must be terrible.
And it's not my cousin. Wait, do you know
because every New Yorker judged a place by its Chinese food.
So, quick question.
Did I hear Jill?
You do.
Yes, she
because
made it in.
I've got 3 questions, and you've got to squish.
You got about 2 questions. Go on.
I got 2 questions. The first is, we know that movie isn't called My Cousin Vinny. Do you remember what it's called?
No.
Oh, okay. Because My Cousin Vinny was accidentally on, sometime about 7 months ago, and I recommend that everybody watch it. That's A. B, while I was listening to your...
Wait, what was it really called?
What, the Pete Davidson movie? I have no idea.
No. You said that it wasn't really called My Cousin Vinny.
Well, you started with My Cousin. You called it My Cousin Vinny.
The movie with Marissa Tomei.
Yes.
In her first big role and won an Academy
Was
Award.
My Cousin Vinny.
Correct. I don't remember the Pete Davidson movie.
Right.
Oh, it's the King of Staten Island.
I was going to say because I just watched that movie.
Was it depressing? Now before
it was at times funny, at times very depressing, and at times very enlightening. But it was a very predictable movie. But it was okay to watch. It was okay to watch.
My issue with
I never got to the end, Marshall. We had a 2-day rental on it, and I wasn't liking it. So we turned it off, and then when I decided, I really should see how this ends up, it was too late. And I didn't want to pay another $20.
If you watch the second
half, it was
an
expensive movie.
If you watch the second half of it, it got much better late in the second half.
Yeah, but you're patient.
All right. Well, I only was watching it. I don't like Pete Davidson very much.
I'm there with you.
I was only watching it for Marissa Tomei, and she could get nominated for that. She was so perfect.
So.
Speaking of perfect, did either of you watch Hamilton yet?
No, not yet. I was going to watch it last night, but I fell asleep.
Well, I can understand that, even if you were watching it.
Well, he'll work on it tonight.
But the thing is, I'll tell you, no. There are moments in it that are just fabulous, okay? And then there are moments of it that's like sort of predictable Broadway. However, Jonathan Groff, now I got to get to the bottom of this. There's a food connection here. Jonathan Groff as King George is absolutely amazing. He was nominated for a Tony. By the way, several people were nominated for Tonys in this. The one who won is a man named David, V-E-E-D, David Diggs. But anyway, Jonathan Groff as King George is absolutely amazing. And what I want to find, and he is from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. There used to be a very famous restaurant called Groff's. If it wasn't in Lancaster, it was right near Lancaster, because what it was all about was Pennsylvania Dutch food. It was one of these places, I don't know if they still exist, I got to find out. Everything was family style. You sat at a long table, perhaps with other people, which was okay, which was better than okay. But if you had a big family group, it was a great place to go. And they would bring out all the dishes family style, and it started with dessert. So I have to find. I have to look this up. I have
He
the
is
Groff
from-
family cookbook here somewhere, and I don't remember the name, Mrs. Groff's name. She had a bunch of children. Jonathan might easily be a grandchild. So, because he's only 35.
So I'm going to give you this because we've got to wrap up. And it says, Jonathan Groff sticks close to Lancaster roots while branching out in film, stage, and TV. In the
Well,
Lancaster.
I knew that,
All
but
right.
the thing is, nowhere
This
can I
is-
find the connection to the restaurant. I searched that also.
What's her name?
But I can't remember. I have to. I have her book here somewhere. I doubt that I disposed of it, and then I probably could find it on Amazon if I looked.
Right, well,
But yeah, I don't remember. But there was a Groff cookbook. There may have been more than one Groff cookbook.
all right.
So, and maybe I can find this, but I know he lives in Lancaster, and his parents are in Lancaster. So I'm thinking that he could be related.
All right. Well, we'll settle it next week.
All right. Take care, guys. Have a cool week.
You too.
too.
Take care, Arthur. Arthur Schwartz, the Food Maven, here on Robin Hood Radio. Underwriting support for Arthur Schwartz, the Food Maven, John Andrews Restaurant on the Hillsdale Road in South Egremont, 413-528-3467, on the web, jarestaurant.com. Rubiners Cheesemongers and Grocers on Main Street in Great Barrington, 413-528-0488, rubiners.com. Hillsdale Home Chef, more information, 518-325-7000, hgshomechef.com.
Robin